Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer for Sports Illustrated and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. It's great to be with all of you today. As you can tell, kind of in a 4th of July mood today. Big 4th of July coming tomorrow. I hope your day is full of family and friends and fireworks celebrating our tremendous country that we're all so fortunate to be a part of, blessed to be a part of. Maybe if you're working, good for you, out making some money and working hard. But however you celebrate or spend tomorrow, hope you have a great day with friends and family. I'm very fortunate today to be joined by a friend who also happens to be a terrific writer for us at Sports Illustrated, covering the Las Vegas Raiders. Tremendous writer, very well respected TV newsman and writer, and all that he does for us. You guys see his byline every single day at our Las Vegas Raiders coverage, the great Carter Landis. Carter, great to have you here again today, buddy.
It's good to be back. Thanks for bringing me back.
We got a lot to dig into today, and I want to just start with Dylan Laube. I remember when the Raiders picked him, I put on there, uh, he'll make the 53 man. And I was told that's a guy projected to make the 53 man roster. He is an interesting player, comes from a very small school in New Hampshire, so it's not like the level of competition's been great. But what he does with his elusivity, his ability to jump, move, that ability to stop, jump, move, and go and accelerate is very rare. You can't teach that. I don't care what level you play at. He is small. So was Joe Morris, and that's where I keep hearing people kind of refer to him along the lines of a Joe Morris type. But he could be a very special, very key, intricate part of those special teams. I know back at the combine, when you were with me with the combine, you were interested in certain types of guys. This is the type of guy you're interested in. And I know you're big on Dylan, so let's talk about him. For you, Carter, what do you see as his path to making that 53, which we think he will, and getting some reps?
Well, I think to start, you talk about special teams. You touched on that a little bit, and that is where he's going to offer a lot of value. This was a guy with New Hampshire that was, a kick returner and a punt returner, and was just used all over the field, and that's where he can provide some of that value to start. And I mean, I think for young players, I think having that special teams experience, that is always good for those young guys. But I think with Dylan Laube, I mean, Laube, I believe.
Laube.
Laube, okay. Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that he had almost 700 rushing yards, 700 receiving yards. So he's doing both at this level. And I think that is so valuable for running backs in the NFL today. I mean, here's the thing. You mentioned you think he's going to make the 53, as do I. I think he's got a path to earning some snaps on offense, not just special teams. I mean, with that ability, the abilities that he does have. Yeah, you mentioned he's a little bit smaller, about 5'9", 207, but I mean, this guy is a legit rusher and a legit receiver. I mean, he can do both of these things. As a runner, you mentioned some of that elusivity, those quick cutbacks, the ability to, he's got good vision. I think when you get him out in space, he may not be the fastest guy. I think he ran about a 4.5 at the combine, but tough to tackle. Get him out in space. He's going to make some moves. And as a receiver, this is a guy you can use in the slot. He's a legit route runner. He's shifty. If he lines up against a slot corner or a linebacker, I think he's going to win that. I actually wrote an article about that just a couple days ago. So
that was a great article, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, and you look at the current situation of the Raiders running back situation. You've got, obviously, Zamir White is going to be the guy who takes the bulk of that carries. But after that, you see Alexander Madison, you see Amir Abdullah. I think functionally, Alexander Madison does some of the same things that Laube does. But I think, you look at running backs and the age factor. You want to be able to get as much juice out of that turnip, as you say, about Dylan Laube, because he's a little bit younger. So I think that with him being there, and Abdullah's a little older, and he's got that special teams value as well. But I think that there's a chance for Dylan Laube to not only make the 53-man roster, but also be that second option right behind Zamir White. I don't know if that's
All right,
bold, but I think that's a very real possibility.
yeah, I like your boldness. I disagree with it, but I love it.
Okay.
Let me go back and tell you where I see his role. Clearly special teams guy. He's a guy that you have to get into space. Now, I was told this, and I think it was a very fair assessment. They want to see him get popped.
Okay.
They want to see him. All right, he's going to get some reps running up the middle. He's going to have to show them. Listen, he has demonstrated toughness, but toughness in New Hampshire and toughness in the NFL are two totally different worlds. There was an old movie, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but it was about a kid who was the governor's son. Grew up in a mansion, was a comedy, and he grew up in a mansion and he wanted to be a rapper and he really wanted to be urban, and it just wasn't legit. It was a hilarious comedy. Man, I know it too, so I wish I had remembered its name. It's kind of the difference between New Hampshire and the NFL. If he can demonstrate that he can take a pop, getting hit by Christian Wilkins is not the same as getting hit by John Smith, who's going to be an accountant at Smith, Walker, and Kovalchek Accountants, next month. It's a whole different world. If he can show that, fine. But they already know Alexander is tough. They know his ability to run between the tackles. I think while there's some similarities, there's some big differences. So let me tell you what I think they are. I think he's a guy that could come in, and because I've been told this, and kind of get lost, literally just get lost running across the middle with linebackers and defensive linemen and offensive linemen. A guy that can, get in there. He's not the fastest, but that jump step, the ability to stop. I mean, the guy can stop on a dime and give you 9 cents change, then hop to the left and be gone again. His acceleration, you don't teach that. You just can't teach it. And I think he has an absolute legit shot of getting legitimate offensive reps. But man, I don't know about beating out Alexander Madison. I think you are a little bit of optimistic there, but I like that about you. You're not afraid to go out on a limb. Sometimes guys are afraid to do that, and that's your job as an analyst. So I like that. Let's switch gears a minute. I want to talk about 12 personnel. I don't want to get into names yet because we're going to get into that in the next point. But for people that don't know, the 12 personnel is one running back, two tight ends. It is one of the most difficult offensive alignments to guard against, especially if you have versatile tight ends that can block and go out on pass routes and catch equally well. The reason you don't see more teams do it is because it's very hard to get two elite tight ends, and you can get tight ends who are great at one thing, and one's a great blocker, one's a great pass runner, but it is rare to find them. We're going to get into that in a minute, the personnel, but the 12 personnel for the Raiders opens up doors. I mean, literally a running back, two tight ends, two wide receivers. You can split both tight ends out. So literally you can go to the line showing 12, split both tight ends out. Now you're in a 4-receiver empty package if you move the running back up on the line. You can bring a guy over. Now you can go 3-1. It's just there are so many things in the 12 personnel that make it the most difficult to defend. What are your thoughts about the Raiders adding 12 personnel this year?
It feels almost out of necessity, right? I mean, you bring in Brock Bowers and you already have Michael Mayer on the roster. You have those two possibly very dynamic tight ends. We already know what Michael Mayer is able to do. We saw that towards the end of last season. And we saw what Brock Bowers did in college. He hadn't done the NFL yet, but we saw him do it in college. He's one of the most dynamic tight end prospects we've ever seen. And both of those guys are guys who can do both of those things. They can both block and they can both run out and catch passes. We know that we saw that with Michael Mayer. You saw him go up over top of Jordan Whitehead against the Jets in that Sunday night game. And I mean, we saw the way that you can use Brock Bowers. You can use him as an inline tight end. You can split him out wide. You can even use him on end arounds. The versatility there is phenomenal. But it's like you say, 12 personnel, you can do so many things with it if you have those two tight ends, and the Raiders do. And I mean, you know what Luke Getsy's about. You know the philosophy offensively that they want to do. They want to run the rock. And that's what Luke Getsy's been able to get out of those Chicago Bears teams of the past. That's what he's looking to do with this Raiders squad too, because you've got those big maulers up front. You've got Zamir White, hungry, ready to prove that opportunity to be the team's lead back. You can run out of 12. You can throw out of 12. There's a lot that you can do with it. And this is going to create a lot of matchup nightmares for opposing defenses when it comes to this Raiders squad. Coming out of that 12 personnel, you got Mayer, you got Bowers. If you're a defensive coordinator, it's a pick your poison situation, I think.
100%. Can't argue with one thing you just said. Brilliant analysis on your part. Okay, now let's go to the personnel. Because Michael Mayer, a lot thought was the number one tight end in 23. The Raiders did. The Raiders had a very high, I don't remember. I didn't look at my notes, but I think it was like 16, 17 best player in the draft in 23. They move up and steal him because so many teams draft poorly now. Then they go and get Brock Bowers. Again, this is a guy they had in the top 3 of their draft, falls to them at 13. A dude, a can't miss prospect. When you look at having those two guys, and we're going to get to Cole Fotheringham and Harrison Butler in a minute because they deserve it. They're both really good tight ends. I mean, the Raiders, in my opinion, with those 4 guys, have the best tight end room in the NFL. But when you look at Bowers and Mayer specifically, both can be split out at wide receivers. Both can run routes out of being on the line. Both can do end arounds. Both terrific blockers. When you begin to look at this and those two guys and the weapons that they are, now one's a rookie, one's a sophomore, they've got to be given time. But man, when you look at what you can do, go back, and I know that the Raiders looked at a lot of film with Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski. And when you begin to look at what that can do with a quarterback like Aiden, who's like Tom Brady, he's not a Patrick Mahomes, there is a lot you can do. And with those two guys, now, teams can't load the box. You got to be back a little bit because you don't know if those guys are running routes. You don't know if they're going to split. It makes Zamir better. But the other thing it does is this, is you've got Jacoby, who's a 1. And Devontae, who's the best in the NFL, in my opinion. Trey Tucker, who's coming. An awesome possession receiver like Michael Gallup. Now it's going to open up opportunities because once they prove they can do it, then teams aren't going to be able to double as much. It just creates a nightmare mismatch. Will you discuss your thoughts on Mayer and Bowers, please?
I want to reiterate a point you made talking about draft philosophies. The Raiders moved up in the second round to get Michael Mayer last year, but that did not stop them from going to get another tight end in Brock Bowers. And I know that raised some eyebrows on draft night. People are like, whoa, why take another tight end when you already had Michael Mayer? Like, you're already good at this position. Tom Telesco executed one of my most valued draft philosophies, and that is to just take good players, draft good players no matter what. And that's what he did, taking Brock Bowers, who was possibly maybe he wasn't the best offensive weapon because I know Marvin Harrison Jr. was in that draft class, but maybe absolutely most versatile tight end in the class, possibly just that offensive weapon type player. He's more than just a tight end. You can do all sorts of different things with him. And that's what they plan to do. I mean, Michael Mayer is a guy who can win at all 3 levels of the field. Brock Bowers is really the same way. I mean, you have just not seen a tight end prospect with the size, speed, strength, run after catch ability that Brock Bowers has. And of course, we need to see it. We need to see him do it in the NFL. But I think the physical traits and the translatable skills are there. And you mentioned a little bit about what they're going to be able to do offensively with those guys, along with you already have Devontae Adams, you already have Jacoby Myers, you already have a burner and Trey Tucker. You can run the ball. I mean, the offensive foundation is quite solid. And for Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, whoever it ends up being, you've got a pretty easy job. And what's a quarterback like Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew's best friend is a reliable tight end. What's better than having one reliable tight end is two.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm going to add another thing here because I think it's really important. So Shannon and I were having dinner with a very dear friend of ours, an NFL general manager, and he was talking about the draft. And he said what really impressed him was the Raiders maybe weren't necessarily a 12 personnel team, but the best player on the board was Brock Bowers. And the best teams adjust their scheme to the talent they have, not to what they want to do. And he said, Telesco's drafting showed he was all in with AP, but the getting of Bowers also said AP said, listen, we're not married to something. We want to be married to winning. I thought that was really great insight from that general manager on that pick.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's talk about Harrison Butler and Cole Fotheringham. There were a lot of people inside the Raiders building that felt Cole Fotheringham should have made this team last year. And oh, by the way, I'm one of them. Then they go out and get Harrison Butler, who I think was a very underrated tight end because of where he was at. This gentleman is a ferocious blocker. He's not a speed demon. You're not going to see him go taking off down the field 50 yards, which you could easily see with Bowers. But he's extremely ferocious blocker, very good hands, very good hands. So he can absolutely receive. Then you go to Cole Fotheringham, who's just tough. I don't think he's the best blocker of the bunch. I don't think he's the best route runner of the bunch. I don't think he's the best pass catcher of the bunch. But he is one of the best well-rounded tight ends and a guy that can do everything. He can step back and play fullback. He can do so many different things. Again, Fotheringham. Those two, I don't think are getting enough discussion right now. Is that fair on my part, or is that over? Am I analysis by paralysis?
I think if you're looking at, the tight end room as a whole, I think you absolutely have to talk about the depth there because as we know, injuries happen in the NFL. And of course, knock on wood, you never want them to happen. But if and when injuries do happen, you need to have guys who are going to be able to step up and sort of, help that team tread water. And I think when you look at a guy like Harrison Bryant and a guy like Cole Fotheringham, I mean, that's really solid depth. Bryant was a solid player for the Cleveland Browns for a while. Good athlete, good solid size. You talk about Cole Fotheringham as well. The Raiders players just rave about his athleticism. And yeah, he was a practice squad guy last year, but I mean, yeah, you look at that athleticism and that ability. Maybe he's not the best blocker, but you did say, he can step in and play fullback. And as a proprietor of the fullback, I'm absolutely a fan of that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if, you look at those guys and they're going to be making Pro Bowls or anything like that. But having those guys as your tight end 3, your tight end 4, that's about as solid as you can get. So, I mean, certainly more recognition than they're getting for sure. I would say so.
All right. Last thing I want to get into with you a lot is, you did pretty much all of our not all of them, but you did a ton of the evaluations prior to the draft. You did your mock drafts. Your work at the combine for Sports Illustrated was priceless. Very dedicated, great writer. You're very analytical. I personally, and I know I'm your boss, but I enjoy your writing. I read everything that you write. I read everything that we write, but when I read yours, it's extremely enjoyable to me because you think like me. You're very analytical. and I enjoy that perspective. So I want to get into something with you. I talked about I did not expect any free agent signings before the 4th. If there is any, I think maybe closer to camp. I'm not even sure about that. I'm just saying maybe. I think the Raiders like what they have. They would like to see a little bit, maybe early in camp. They've watched when they get back after the 4th, they're going to watch all the film again from the offseason. So maybe they see something and say, okay, let's pull the trigger before camp and go get this guy. When I did my 53-man roster, I said I thought there was maybe one person who isn't yet on the roster that'll make the final 53. Here's my point to you. I think there's a couple of positions that they could go get a free agent or make a trade. I know that they were looking at a trade right after the offseason ended, and I think they were pretty close on it. I don't know that, but I was led to believe it was pretty close at one point. When I first reported it, it wasn't. It was just a discussion. My point to you is what are some possible free agents or trades that are sitting out there that you think are potentials for the Raiders?
First, I want to say thank you for those kind words. What should I write in the memo line for your check when I mail it to you?
You know what, though? But I'm going to be honest with you, Carter, and we're not going to forget that point. And I think our readers enjoy that about you. A journalist's job, whether it's you on television or me when I'm on television or podcasts or radios or writing, is to take people somewhere that they don't get to go. And you get to go there. You're at the combine, you're at those things, you're able to see and talk to guys and not just read a transcript. You're able to look at their body languages, their nuances. I'll never forget one time I was standing next to a guy and I interviewed him. And I asked him about being about his new coach. And he goes, "Yep, it's great to have him. And we're glad he's here." Looked down the entire time, no emotion, no smile, just monotone voice. So when I wrote about him, and there just didn't seem to be a whole lot of excitement about a new coach. Not going to tell you who it is or what team, but people were like, "What are you talking about? I read the quote. He's excited that he's there. He's glad he's there." Yeah. But when you were standing next to him, and so I put the video up, and then everybody got it. And I love that about you because you take people where they can't go, and that's part of being analytical. So I want you to know, and you've worked for me for a long time now. I don't give out compliments that are not sincere. I don't believe in it. I don't like it. I don't like it when people do it to me, and I don't think you like it either.
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you. I really do appreciate it. So going back to our original point of the free agents, I think I've had questions about the secondary, the cornerbacks for a while, and I think that there are still some solid cornerbacks out there who I'm still a little bit confused as to why they haven't been signed. You look at a former Defensive Player of the Year in Stephon Gilmore. You look at a former first-round pick in Adoree Jackson. Those are some guys who I think that you could see sign as we approach training camp, whether that's with the Raiders or whoever it may be. I think as we approach training camp, I think teams will see what they have and start making some calls to free agents. You look at some guys who could be up for trades. One of those guys possibly. I don't want to speculate. I'm just saying some names out there. I mean, you look at some guys maybe who haven't gotten a fair shake with their team. Some young guys who maybe have fallen out of the rotation or just haven't gotten that chance. One of those guys I think is Kaiir Elam, who was a first-round pick of the Buffalo Bills out of Florida. Didn't see the field very much, wasn't active on some game days during his rookie season. So could be a chance that, maybe the Raiders see some possibility of some talent in there and they still want to maybe try to get that out of there. I know that's another one. I think one is if they were looking to maybe possibly shore up some wide receiver depth, I think you look at a guy like John Mechie from the Houston Texans. The Texans decided to bring in lots more receivers. I mean, now they have Stephon Diggs. Tank Dell was excellent last year. Nico Collins had a breakout. Robert Woods is a vet that's still there. So he's being pushed down. They also traded for Ben Skoranek as well. So that could push Mechie out of the rotation. That's another guy drafted just a couple years ago that could still have some talent in there that possibly the Raiders could swing on and add to that rotation of receivers and have another young guy that they could see some potential in.
All right, I'd like to ask you a question then. You got Devontae, you got Jacoby, you got Trey, you got Gallup, and you got Guyton.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you think they need to go trade? I'm asking you this: would you like to see them go trade to add another guy, a sixth guy?
Possibly. It just depends on what I think they see from. I really think the wild card there is Trey Tucker. Are they seeing another step from him year 2? I bet that they do. And then you look at a guy like Michael Gallup, really good a couple years ago. Injuries have started to slow him down. Is this a chance for you to maybe get a younger guy with a little bit less tread on the tires? So
yeah, I just think a competitor. I love it. No, I like the way you're thinking. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm liking the way you're thinking. All right. I want to get to a guy that I'm going to be talking about a lot. Janoris Robinson, the defensive tackle. J-Rob. This is a guy that really last year flashed a little bit. And I like him. And I know when I talk to players and say, hey, give me a guy it's not nobody's really talking about that you think we should be. J-Rob. I mean, almost everyone I talk, J-Rob. This is a guy, they need him to take that next step. I think he will. I am a big J-Rob guy. What say you?
I'm a J-Rob guy too, for sure. And I agree totally with those flashes. I think you see the physical profile with him, a long, big, just solid size. He had the 1 sack last year, but he was getting in the backfield a lot. And I think that, you can look at sack numbers and be like, oh, he's got a low number of sacks, but that doesn't always tell the whole story. I mean, if you see a guy who's constantly getting in the backfield as a disruptor, that's a little bit more contextual in terms of where a guy is as a defensive end, a pass rusher. And I think that there was a lot of that on tape with Janarius Robinson last year. And I think that with another year of growth, another year of stability, consistency with this organization, you can see a little bit more of that. I mean, with your edge rusher group, Crosby, Kuntz, Tyree Wilson, it may be a little bit tough for him to, break through that a little bit. But I think as a depth guy, you let him loose on certain downs and in certain packages. I mean, that's a guy who's going to disrupt some things and cause some problems. So, yeah, for sure. I totally understand when you say players are saying that we're not talking enough about Janarius Robinson. Absolutely. I think that he should be talked about a little more. And you know what? I think we'll see it once we get to camp. Once he starts to make more plays, you'll start to see it more out there. Once we get to camp, once we get to preseason, we'll get to see that from him.
Totally agree. All right, Carter, do me a favor. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media, on X, please.
So I am at Carter Landis 3 on X, formerly known as Twitter. You can go ahead and follow me. I'll post the things that I write on there and other things if you care.
Great guy. He's a great follow. Thanks a lot, Carter. Look forward to it. Hope you have a wonderful 4th. Get to spend some time with family. We'll talk to you next week, brother.
All right. Thank you.